Okay, well, this anti-China stuff seems to be getting a bit out of hand. I think it's devolving into a sort of hysteria. And of course, I'm talking about the ongoing saga between, dealing with Trump and these Chinese tech companies. From the beginning, I was very suspicious of Trump's actions. I thought that it really just looked like he was acting, in the interests of American tech companies, who I'm not particularly a big fan of, and who, of course, Trump shouldn't be a fan of either, since they're not exactly on his side. The tech companies here are kind of actively against him. And, starting with TikTok and the talk of banning TikTok because it was supposed to be some kind of super spy app, Microsoft seemed to be using what Trump was doing as leverage to buy out TikTok from its Chinese owners, and it all looked very corrupt to me on the surface, because it just looked like Trump was talking a big game about how he's going to get rid of TikTok, essentially scaring the Chinese owners to try and sell the thing off as quickly as possible to Microsoft, and had that deal gone through, I would be more critical than I am now. But instead, Trump didn't seem to care whether Microsoft bought it or not. He was going to get rid of it either way, and he went ahead and did that, just through executive fiat. Now, do I think that the President of the United States has the power to, ban apps through just signing a piece of paper according to the Constitution? Well, of course not. But we're in we're very far away from the Constitution and constitutional powers, so I don't think now is exactly the time to start complaining about that. And so Trump actually going through with this, despite the efforts of U.S. tech giant Microsoft to take over TikTok, lends a bit more credence to his point. Still don't necessarily think that it's anything worth getting too upset about, the whole TikTok thing, but at least I think that Trump takes it seriously. It doesn't seem to be at this point just some pure, cynical propaganda move, because otherwise he would have just, let Microsoft buy them out, I would think, and then that would have been the end of it. Now, before I move on to the latest thing that Trump has done with these Chinese tech companies, and namely Tencent, I think that it would be interesting to go back a couple of days to the TikTok thing, and talk about a story I saw this morning, which was published in Forbes and then reprinted over at antiwar.com, which was how I found the link through there. But I think I'll link the original Forbes article in the description. But the CIA has found no evidence that TikTok was being used to just send over people's data. Now, obviously, because it is an app that has your data, just like any website. Could they, in theory, send that off to the Chinese government or identity thieves or something like that? Well, of course they could. Any website can. But apparently the CIA has found no specific examples of this really being done, meaning that it would seem as though TikTok just operates as a normal app/website. But is it still fair to be somewhat concerned about the Chinese government having your data? Sure. Because they certainly can get it. Everyone recognizes that, because of course, we should know from our own experiences here in the United States with the NSA that, our government has all of our data on everything. And so, why wouldn't the Chinese government? So I guess the thing here that really baffles me about everything that's been going on is not that people could think these things, but that they're so hysterical about it. That they're like, oh my gosh, TikTok could be, sending my data off to a foreign government. It's like, well, Twitter and Facebook already do that with the domestic government, Google and all those. I mean, the NSA has a backdoor into AT&T's network. And so not just a single website, but that whole ISP, anybody who uses AT&T, and I imagine the other ISPs too. It's just that the story that came out was a leak dealing exclusively with AT&T, but I'm sure this is true with all the other ISPs, that the NSA has a direct backdoor. They track all communications. And so if you operate in China as a tech company, I have no doubt that the Chinese government has the same sort of thing. But the reason why, people, I guess, are able to live their lives every day and not be concerned about the NSA, and why they probably should, if they're using a Chinese app, go about their day not being concerned about the Chinese government either, is that these governments collect so much data that they really don't go through it all. It's not like you have a person sitting at a desk who's reading every single thing you tweet. Or rather, I should say, reading every single thing that you DM to other people, since, of course, tweets are public anyway. You don't need any special backdoor to the internet to do that. There's not some person sitting at a desk, following all of your metadata and watching you go around town every day. These companies these governments, just from what I understand, don't have the resources to process all of this. They just sort of catalog it. Now, in the case of the U.S. government, though, I mean, in theory, if you're someone who lives in the United States, and the government's tracking all this stuff, theoretically, if you're doing something that they don't like, they could round you up and throw you in prison for it. But the Chinese government, I mean, if you're saying stuff that they don't like, there's not a whole lot that they can do to you, I guess, unless you're some kind of powerful person and they have your dick pics or something. Then I guess the Chinese government could blackmail you with that private information. But I mean, no matter where I live, I would be primarily concerned with my own government having my data. I'd be much less concerned with a foreign government. In fact, if I could, I would much rather have it switched to where, 95% of all the websites and tech companies that have my data, were outside of the U.S. rather than inside of the U.S. I mean, think about it. Why is it that people connected to Israeli intelligence have been investing heavily in their country in sort of an Israeli Silicon Valley? It's because, the way that in the modern world, the way that you have an effective intelligence apparatus is by having, an effective tech sector in your country to serve as a front for your intelligence services. The U.S. understands that more than anybody. The Israelis clearly understand that, and I'm certain the Chinese understand that too. And that's why the Chinese, being an authoritarian single-party state, don't really like letting other tech companies operate in their country because they want to control all of their own citizens' data. I understand that from the Chinese perspective. But frankly, as an American who is not exactly interested in great power politics and all these things, I really don't care to try and shut out the Chinese, because they're no worse in my eyes than the NSA certainly. But unfortunately, it's very easy for people to sort of buy into this, and I guess it's not really red baiting since these aren't the Russians anymore. I guess you could say it's it's not a red scare, it's more of a yellow scare. And I don't believe that the color yellow when associated with Chinese that's not a racial thing, I don't think, right? Because the flag used to be yellow and they have the Yellow River. I don't know. I don't want to go kind of full Chinese propagandist and use the term Sinophobia, kind of like all the Russians always talk about Russophobia. But really, I do think that people are being whipped up into a hysterical fear of the Chinese government. The Chinese government is, a very bad institution. I think that's pretty easy to recognize. They are responsible for the greatest loss of life in human history under Mao. This is still that same regime. People kind of forget that. But the key thing with the Chinese government is that they've always been a threat to their own people, not really to Americans. I don't know how many Americans in America have been harmed by the Chinese government. And so I really don't live in fear, every night that, Chinese thugs are going to come knock on my door and, make me recite the quotations of Chairman Mao or something. I'm much more afraid of being detained by my own government as a subversive in some kind of modern Rex 84 implementation. You guys ever heard of Rex 84? I believe that's what it was called. It was Readiness Exercise 1984. I think is what the 84 stood for. It was during the Reagan administration, and the basic idea was, hey, there's some kind of, national security threat, a natural disaster, some big terrorist attack, or we go to war, and we have to round up all the subversives, for the sake of national security. And so, what's implied kind of by the Rex 84 exercise is that, well, the U.S. government, at least back then, had some list of subversive citizens who had views that were, against wars or against the government in any way. And so knowing that, I'm much more worried about being monitored by the NSA than I am by the Chinese government. Because if such a list, were to exist, I'm most likely one of the people on it. And so I guess it would be nice to talk to some of these people who are very worried about China and all of this tech surveillance that China is being accused of, which again may or may not be true. Wouldn't shock me if it was, but we have no evidence that it really is. So what are you guys afraid of? Because I just don't really see the threat. And so I guess that's as a general baseline. I'll move on to the whole thing with Tencent before I get too far down this road and I don't have time to talk about it. But Tencent, which is the parent company of WeChat, it's a very actually big media conglomerate. The White House is apparently equally concerned about this company as they are about TikTok, and their parent company, which again, it is a Chinese tech firm. I'd imagine it is, well connected to Chinese intelligence. And so Trump banned people from transacting with Tencent, I believe is how the executive order is worded. And, this is very concerning, not just the TikTok thing, but I mean, this is way more concerning because Tencent already is very much, connected with a lot of international interests. People have brought up countless film studios. They have deals with the NBA. Of course, I think the most notable thing that keeps getting put in headlines is Fortnite, because I guess they own maybe is it 40% of Epic Games? And so people are very concerned that Fortnite is canceled by Trump. And this whole, episode, whether or not that's true or not, it'll give people a bit of a taste of what I've been talking about, how painful it would be to try and decouple the United States and the Chinese, not only their economies, but their societies. It's not as simple as, stop buying made in China washers and dryers. Buy a good Whirlpool washer and dryer, made in Indiana or something. That's a very surface level understanding of international trade and commerce. There's a lot that goes back and forth between China and the U.S. and things that are made all around the world that maybe are assembled in China partially. One step of production might be in China. Or a Chinese company, like in this case of Tencent, might have, financial interests in other companies around the world. And so there's that angle of it. But, what almost is concerning me more is this idea that, the president, just by executive order, is going to invalidate business relationships and, breach contracts and the like. I mean, this is not the kind of thing that you want to do if you have any interest in international trade as far as your entire nation is concerned. Countries that do this, that make these kinds of laws. Actually, it reminds me of Zimbabwe when they passed that indigenization law to where, 50% of every business has to be owned by a black Zimbabwean or something. Well, when you do that, of course, you're going to push out foreign investment. I mean, if we're going to get to the point to where the president of the United States is micromanaging things to such an extent that he's dictating, what companies, you can do business with on a day-to-day basis, and just, by whatever his whims are, can say, you can't work with Toyota anymore, so sorry if you have some long-standing partnership where you buy, one part for, something that you manufacture from Toyota, you're done there. Or if you are a Toyota dealer or something like that, you're out of business. I mean, I just don't know where this ends. And, and part of me, a lot of the times with this stuff, when I should react much more, much more negatively, I guess. Because, I mean, this is terrible precedent. I mean, just imagine what a Democrat president could do with this. They could rule, that you can't do business with certain Republican-owned companies. The Koch brothers, they're banned. But at this point, I mean, it seems like we're so close to the end of America that I just can't help caring that much. It just seems like, you know, one more footnote along the road to destruction. You know, I mean, I still am stuck in this mindset that, you know, who cares if the President of the United States becomes even more dictatorial than, you know, they already were, which, you know, President of the United States is pretty close to a dictator. If it were any other country, we would call the President of the United States a dictator. And I don't mean Trump specifically. I mean the presidency as an institution is relatively dictatorial. Can operate unilaterally without too much protestation in most areas. But I mean, you know, given all that, that's only possible because of the Federal Reserve's power to manipulate our economy. And, you know, that is a privilege that I do think is going to expire quite soon. But I don't want to make this video about the Fed, so I guess we'll cut things off here. If you gain anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.